UFC Fight Night is just around the corner this Saturday, the first UFC event of 2025 in the well-renowned UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. Paul Brown is here with me, Ian O'Neill. We're going to look at the card. It's headlined by Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas, the second time that they'll be in action. A pretty lackluster main event in Santiago Ponzinibbio against Carson Harris, but we do have a couple of decent fights throughout this card. We'll talk about that card a little bit more, Paul, in a few minutes. But as I said to you before we came on here, I wanted to kind of talk maybe about the general direction that the UFC is going, what we'd like to see with the UFC. Obviously, it might sound like a prior or a broken record. I think everyone would be in a big agreement that, we want to see less and less Apex shows. I think they had a sense and they had a meaning in around the pandemic, but we've passed that. But I don't think we're going to see the end of them. So we kind of just have to eat that up and swallow it. But in terms of what the UFC, I was listening to Sean and Graham on, I think it was either the Bold Predictions or the award show. Maybe it was the Bold Predictions, just talking about the UFC and it maybe not being a banner year for the UFC, but they had a big 300 card, they had a big Sphere card, and a couple of other decent fights as well. And I tend to agree. I think it was a good year for UFC in 2024. Maybe not a great year financially. Of course, they're being operated excellently as a business now. They're breaking all kinds of records. So, but I think more so from what we like to talk about on the preview show is in terms of fights and champions, what we'd like to see in terms of events. I think more events in front of crowds is a necessity, I think, in 2025, Paul. But when I pose that question to you, what would you like to see from the UFC in 2025?
You mentioned there the quality of these cards. I mean, when we look at the card that's taking place this weekend, and don't be shitting all over it, but you look at it in the broader spectrum. You're looking at what comes the week after. So the week after, you've got UFC 311, which has a couple of title fights on it, and it's got a cracking lineup. The week after that, we've got the Road to Dubai Champion Series, of course, for us as Irish MMA fans. We've a huge interest in that. We have 4 Irish fighters on there. And the week after that, I think the UFC are back in Saudi Arabia with Israel Adesanya headlining the card. So there's 3 consecutive weeks of sensational cards. And I think UFC 312 won't be, I think it's only maybe 2 weeks after that one. So there's a massive lineup of fights taking place over the month following this weekend's card. And that kind of makes this weekend's lineup, in contrast, look exactly what it is. There isn't a single, I'll shout out Andy Hickey for this one on X or Twitter. There isn't a single ranked male fighter on this whole card this weekend. The only 2 ranked fighters on the card are the 2 fighters in the main event. And we've already seen how that one plays out. So, I mean, after 4 weeks off, fight fans would be somewhat eager, happy the UFC is back. But, I mean, for me, we had Will Fleury's fight only a couple of weeks ago, so it doesn't really feel like we've gone that long because we had a little bit of interest in that, and I covered the event, so it was great to sit down and watch the whole show. I was happy with that, but, I'm not chomping at the bit to watch this one this weekend. I'm just more focusing on what's coming after it, and I'd like more of the cards to have that feel, We did I really enjoyed the UFC 310 preview, the last pay-per-view preview we did this year, because Ian Gary was on it and he was in a brilliant fight, and there was a handful of other fights that were, I think the whole card, you, me and Spencer were giddying up on the last episode of this preview show about that card. So I'd love to see more cards with that, and I'd love to see them focus more on the quality of the lineups. You mentioned financial, they're doing well financially. The reason they're doing well financially is because ticket prices are far, far higher than they ever have been before. Same as is happening in all the other sports.
Even looking at I was like, I tuned in out of interest. It was the WWE's debut on Netflix on Monday night. On a pretty good time for me over here. It was on at 7. So look, at way back in the day, I did look at wrestling quite a bit. But I know this is a kind of a big deal in the wrestling community as well. And at the very start of it, they were in the Inuit Arena, where 310 is happening anyway, and in the LA.
311. The next pay-per-view.
311 is going on there, and 17,500 people in there. Fantastic arena. Looked at the production for the UFC next week at 311.
It's a brand new arena, isn't it?
It's brand new, but like it's the way it's set up. It's not like your standard, just like oval arena. It's kind of has a couple of different cool graphics and stuff, but that's besides the point. But what I was getting to there was Triple H was in the ring, and he congratulated the crowd for being, breaking the gate record for a wrestling event in the history of the WWE. So we're seeing, obviously it's the same company as TKO, so they're absolutely killing it in ticket sales, and people are paying it as well. We're having sold out arenas and everything like that, which to me, Paul, is kind of a little bit more confusing. The fact that they're unwilling to move these cards away from the Apex. It's like if you have the ability to go out and sell these arenas, well, why don't you go out there and sell those arenas? Now, obviously, there's other costs with moving shit around and production wise and everything like that. In terms of in comparison, I would imagine to what it is like in the Apex, but it's a kind of a particular kind of scenario the UFC are in. They've found their structure, they know what works. And, it's kind of a little bit rich, maybe, in my opinion, for me to come out here and criticize when they are doing so well financially. But like I said, it's at the cost of maybe some level of entertainment, or maybe, the quality is dipping a little bit on some of these cards as well. But, the pay-per-view cards, as you said, are always top notch. But maybe it's just, we've often talked about it on the preview shows, you growing up through the years and me growing up through the years watching the UFCs where, every event felt like a big event. It's not really the case anymore, being honest, looking at them now.
Yeah, it seems like they only have their eyes on the bottom line, the amount of money that they're taking in, and they're not prioritizing the quality of the product. And we've seen it this year. I mean, everyone's been kind of wrapping up 2024 and recounting, all the best fights, the best finishes, blah, 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 blah. The strength and depth on those short lists isn't where it was. Do you know what I mean? You're looking at the best fights of the year. The short lists are quite short, and then all the best knockouts and all the best submissions. There's just that little bit less. Definitely ones of meaning, because there's not that many. There's not as many big fights with big names in them these days, because the UFC are just sort of they've watered down the product for me over the last couple of years. Now, look, still get hyped up for a pay-per-view, still watch it, but
oh, and
it's
I'm going to watch
trending in one
every
direction.
single. I'm going to watch every fucking single fight on this card. No, I give out about it now, but I will watch every single fight on this card on Saturday. That being said, but there's one thing I wanted before we go on and actually talk about the card. There's another thing, and I'm wondering, and I'm curious if you would agree with me or not. And the question was, what would we like to see change with the UFC in 2025? What I really would like to see change is champions staying in their division to defend their title and racking up, win after win after win. Everyone talks about, John Jones and is he this and is he that? Like, that man has 17 consecutive title defenses, and we're at a day and age now where people want to defend their title once or twice and then move up to become a double champion. And, I think the longevity of champions in divisions kind of, I think we talked about it ahead of the Ilya Topuria fight with Max Holloway. Ilya Topuria has the chance to go here and there and everywhere, but he also has the chance to create a real legacy for himself in the featherweight division by going and just clearing the competition. And, I have no problem if you clear competition and then you want to move up, if there's no fresh competition for you. I think it makes sense. But this thing where you win the title, maybe defend it once, and then you're asking to go up, I'd really like to see that kind of get dwindled down a little bit. And I'd like to see champions kind of stay in their division and defend their belt multiple times. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we do get excited when it's champion versus champion, like when Volkanovski goes up to fight Makachev. But when everybody starts doing it, it just kind of it dulls that little bit of excitement. Like when McGregor made the move up, and then all of a sudden he was fighting at 170, fighting Nate Diaz. It was like, we don't see this. What's going on? And it added to the intrigue of the whole product, the whole show. But and it's happening all the time. Like Ilya Topuria is talking about doing that. He has the chance, the opportunity to build a legacy there along the lines of the one that George St. Pierre built, that Anderson Silva built. But we don't see fighters looking to do that now. They get that belt, and Sean O'Malley got the belt, and he called out Ilya Topuria after in his post-fight speech after he beat Chito Vera. And look, they're great fights, and yeah, I'd love to see it, but is no champion ever going to try and put together a winning streak of 5, 6, 7 world title fights? I mean, it's definitely a point. Yeah, I'd like to see not just the featherweight division, but if any champion can win it, can take hold of a division like that. Maybe Alexandre Pantoja is that guy, and just
Yeah, he's well on the
dominate.
way for sure. Yeah, he's
What's
well
he,
on the
3 or
way
4
for that.
title defenses in already? Like, so
Yeah, I think he
he's
might be 3 in now. So yeah, it's I mean, I just like to see it. I think it, it was it was good when it was, not uncommon. Like when it wasn't common, it was good. Like when Connor went up, like you said, it was new, it was fresh, but they've just stayed going back to it, and champions have seen that and they want to go back to it too. And obviously, more money and everything like that, not having to cut weight. But I mean, it takes away from the integrity of the title itself as well. When you're putting it on the shelf, it's not being defended. You look at Zhang Weili, only had one turnaround last year. The women's, what was it, the women's 125-pound title? I think, what was it, once or was it twice, maybe once as well at the Sphere?
It was, yeah, because the first fight happened toward the end of 2023, I believe.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I'd like to
They
see
had an
more
immediate rematch.
and I was there. I criticize Israel Adesanya a lot, but I tell you, he was a guy who turned the title around quite a bit now. So I'll have to give credit where credit is due. And it's not
He was the
easy to
last
do.
man to do that. Yeah, he was the last
Yeah,
man to do it so often that he just got sick of it. Like Anderson Silva got sick of it. George St. Pierre got sick of it. But while they were at the top, they just took on everybody and beat them, and that legacy lives forever. And Adesanya pretty much did that too. He took Anderson Silva's title. It had passed through the hands of Rockhold and Bisping and whatnot. Uh, but he got a hold of that title, and he ran with it, and he turned up and competed whatever it was 3 or 4 times per year every year until just mentally he couldn't keep doing it. And yeah, that's fair enough. You have to respect that. But yeah, fair play to that guy. He maybe doesn't get the respect he deserves in the light of that.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would agree. But nonetheless, we are at the Apex this weekend, Paul. A rematch between Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Hebas. A fight that took place. Let me see. It took place way back in 2019. I thought it was sooner than that. Unanimous decision win there for Amanda Hebas in that fight. It was a close fight. Very over and back. They were very evenly matched at that stage. Now, obviously, over the last number of years, they've both grown into the fighters that they've become now. And I guess this main event, Paul, will tell us who's grown more, who has developed more, and who has made use of their time, their training, and built their skill set to come into this fight. And I'll beg that question to you: who, based off what you've seen in recent fights, who would you be confident of going in there and getting the win in the main event on Saturday night?
Yeah, like you said, it's 5 years removed from the previous fight, so it's difficult to sort of hang your hat on that, the result, and what we saw in that fight too strongly. But Hebas was just maybe a more complete mixed martial artist at that point, and she's a jiu-jitsu black belt too, as well as Mackenzie Dern. And Mackenzie Dern, a much higher level of a jiu-jitsu black belt, but this is not sport jiu-jitsu. And that was, I think it was Mackenzie Dern's second or third fight in the octagon, and it was the same for Hebas, maybe her second. So they were both sort of on the come up at that point. But Hebas did a great job in that fight of using her jab. And you could see at that point, Mackenzie Dern was still sort of getting to grips with striking at a decent level. She'd won fights outside the UFC. I believe she was an Invicta and that before. But, she was still sort of getting the hang of things. I'm not even sure if she was working with Jason Perillo at that point. And I know she's been with him over the last few years and whatnot. She was at that stage where she was really loading up on her shots, and you could kind of just you could evade them comfortably. Hebas used her reach advantage quite well. She did a great job of just moving laterally, so she was never just there to be taken down. And then she was just popping straight shots, ones and twos, jabs, straight rights, and she was finding the chin and just doing enough to eke out each round, and making Dern struggle to really implement her style on the fight. We saw Dern at the time, her takedowns even, they're not elite level takedowns. The girl is a really good sport jiu-jitsu player, and that's a background I come from. But there's a big difference between that and fighting. Big difference. Like, I've got good jiu-jitsu, I've got decent striking, but goddamn, I'm crap at wrestling. And when you're sparring and someone doesn't want to get taken down, or they're getting the better of you on the feet, it's not a nice place to be, because you lack the hardware to flip the script, to change the fight up. And Dern sort of finds herself in that position a lot. You'll see her kind of going for a takedown, and and just connecting to somebody, but not really knowing how to turn a corner on a takedown, or how to get that drive off her toes. And she never really improved strongly in that respect over the years. She's decent with body lock takedowns, but when you're out in the center of the octagon, if you've got good boxing, good striking, good distance management, you've got all the tools necessary to handle someone like Mackenzie Dern. So it's up to her to basically prove that she has built upon those weapons that she came into the UFC with this weekend.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I mean, the way you described that first fight is, I could see a similarity happening in this one too. With Mackenzie Dern, like you said, I feel that, obviously her jiu-jitsu is good. She's been working with Perillo, those in between bits and melding those kind of skill sets together, for transitioning to takedowns. A body lock isn't going to get you the fight down to the ground every single time you do it. So you got to be a little bit inventive when it comes to that. And, Mackenzie Dern, obviously her grappling is very good. With her striking, I think we've seen flashes of her work that over the last number of years with Jason Perillo, but she goes back to her core tendencies. Once she's hit in the face, to be honest, you know what I mean? When you get kind of taken out of your comfort zone, you do go back to your core tendencies. That's where we see a little bit of wildness. That's where we see a little bit of kind of recklessness. And that has cost her in some fights as well. Obviously, in that last fight with Rose Namajunas, she didn't have the ability too much to take down Rose Namajunas at will. And, like you said, someone with a good jab, with a good one too, can really cause her problems. And Amanda Ribas, she has those kind of traits as well. She's a rough and tumble kind of a fighter. She doesn't mind getting her hands dirty. She doesn't mind getting into the pocket. She's a good scrambler. I think, Mackenzie Dern is a good scrambler too, but there's a difference between, pure sport Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scrambling and then scrambling in the middle of the fight where you could catch an elbow, a knee, or anything in the midst of a scramble too. When you're looking at Mackenzie Dern's, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and how she's melded it into mixed martial arts, Paul, what kind of impresses you the most about what she offers in the grappling department?
It's kind of cool. It does. She impresses me sometimes, and other times she doesn't. Like that Hebas fight, for example, the first one. Like she'll get the fight to the floor, and then there'll just be that little. She'll try to play jujitsu as opposed to just go be aggressive. Like we saw Hebas throw her a couple of times with some nice judo throws, because as soon as she felt the connection, it was just turn, rotate, step across, go, and that's how you've got to do. You've got to change your way of playing jujitsu. So sport jiu-jitsu is a game. Fighting is not a game. So there is quite a different mindset, and it's very difficult to make that switch when you've become accustomed to maybe driving your car in one or two gears, and then you've got to be in your higher gears then all the time. It's very it's difficult to sort of implement that into your style. So I'd like to see her do that a little bit more. And we've seen some nice finishes. I mean, she got a beautiful knee bar finish. I can't remember who it was over, but it's a case of once you sniff an opportunity, grab it and drag out of that limb, clamp down on what you need to clamp down on, rather than kind of being comfortable getting somebody into your guard and starting to try and work opportunities. It doesn't work that way. That's how I kind of do jiu-jitsu when I'm wearing a gi and I'm on the mat. I have a style where I set traps for people and I play the game. It's a crafty kind of style. But if you put gloves on me and my training partner, that falls out the window. It's no use to me. And I learned that the hard way when I went back training MMA a couple of years back. I had to completely just rip up the script. So I'd like to see Mackenzie Dern just have more of a killer instinct when the fight does hit the mat.
Yeah, it's a very, very good assessment. And, you definitely see that both on the feet and in her grappling, where, you can get kind of stuck into wanting to obtain position, but MMA calls for action, and you need to be very, very active when you're on the mat. Obviously, landing shots. I mean, just simply taking someone down and laying on top of them is not enough in modern day mixed martial arts. So I think that's the battle that Mackenzie Dern has been fighting and will be fighting in this fight against Amanda Hebas, who had a great win against Lupitina Benitez in her last fight. I think Lupitina was on a very, very good run. Very good fighter. Well, Amanda Hebas kind of come in, stopped her in her tracks, and picked up a good win there, which set up this fight as well. And I think, with Amanda Hebas, she's probably, I would imagine, accepted this fight with both hands, having gone out there and beat her before. She'll have put the work in over the last number of years, and she'll obviously feel that she can come in here and do the job again, Paul. What parts of her game, Amanda Hebas, are you impressed by most?
It's going to be like what'll be really important for her this weekend is going to be her ability to keep away from the fence. And I like her footwork. She knows what she's doing. Do you know what I mean? You'll watch some people, I mean, particularly in the lower tiers of MMA and, some of the women's divisions as well. You've got some excellent fighters at the top end. And then, there could be a quick drop in quality when you're looking at certain fighters, maybe outside the top 10. You might see people that have clunky footwork and, shout out to Jamal Hill there, but you might see, you might see
He'll
people
be
that
on to
just
you
are
now, and he'll be on to you now on Twitter. So he will.
they're lacking fundamentals, and she is not one of those. She does have kind of good balance, good weight distribution, and she did a great job in that first fight of just never getting pinned against the fence, because when someone isn't good at shooting takedowns, like wrestling style takedowns, shooting for the legs out in the open water, like we saw Shavkat do in, was it round 3 against Ian Gary, or round 4, the later round when he turned it back on, I think it was round 4. Those type of takedowns, if someone doesn't have the ability to do that, and I don't think Mackenzie Dern does, then what you've got to do is you've got to stay away from the fence, because what they want to do is they want to walk you back to the fence, clinch up, and start to work their takedowns from there, because you don't have to be as athletic to do that. You can methodically set them up, which suits a jiu-jitsu player like Mackenzie Dern, who has a good understanding of weight distribution and your body position and stuff. So keeping herself out in the open water, we always talk about the little ring on the
The
canvas,
threshold, yeah, the old
the
black threshold,
threshold,
yeah.
the one that Ilia Topuria wants to get you on the outside of. What she wants to do is try and stay in that, not get backed up to the fence. And it's a decent size octagon at the apex. It's not the full size one, but there is enough room for some straw weights to kind of swing a few cats around if they need to. So she should be able to. I think she should have enough in her locker, but that'll be the key. It's her footwork. And she did a really good job of it in the first fight, I have to say. Like, she was never caught standing in one spot, so it's very difficult to find her hips.
Mm.
She'd throw shots and just move left, throw shots and just move right, and just be ready to move laterally all the time. So I'm expecting to see more of the same.
Yeah, and I think Amanda Hebas's footwork has gotten better, obviously, in the last number of years too. And obviously, this being a main event, it'll be a 5-round fight as well. It'll be very interesting to see how both these women will kind of progress into the 4th and 5th round if it gets that far. Like, I mean, both have been guilty of maybe gassing out, but I would more worry about Amanda Hebas's gas tank as I would Mackenzie Dern's. I think she's been in there. She's been looking good in the 4th and 5th round, has Mackenzie Dern in recent fights. And obviously Hebas has been working on her cardio too and has been looking better, but she has been gassing pretty hard. And I think if you're Mackenzie Dern here and you try and fight a gritty fight and you try and close the distance and you try to put her up against the cage and you force her to work up against the cage, I think that Mackenzie Dern can get Amanda Hebas tired. And then, I think she could go on and get a submission in round 4, rounds 5. But like I said, if it's the footwork battle, you hit the nail on the head there. It's where this fight will take place, in my opinion, will define who gets their hand raised as the winner in the first main event of the year. Let's talk about the co-main event. Not super exciting fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Carlston Harris in a 170-pound division. Both heavy hitters, both like a lockout. Carlston Harris has a submission in him as well. Um, Anything get you excited about this fight at all, Paul? I mean, at the very least, maybe we might see a knockout.
Well, like, you've got Ponzinibbio there, who's what, 18th, 19th UFC fight. I'm just trying to scroll back through his record here. I think he's 1-4 in his last 5. He has that potential to get the knockout. I mean, his last win was just over 2 years ago against Alex Morono, and he's lost a couple of fights since. He's in there with decent competition in that run. So, like, look at this for list of names: Jeff Neal, Michelle Pereira, Kevin Holland, and Muslim Salikov. So, I mean, no donkeys there. You know what I mean? And prior to that, there was quite a long winning streak from Ponzinibbio, and Gunnar Nelson was in the middle there with that famous eye poke,
Yeah,
1.5 minutes of eye poking and cheating. But he's got that quality, or he had at the very least. Both guys in their late 30s now, and his opponent here, Harris, he lost his last fight, but prior to that, he'd been on a kind of a decent run himself. And you mentioned there he has a submission. Darce chokes and anacondas are kind of his bread and butter. But
yeah.
Ponzinibbio has never been finished by submission. So it's difficult for me to see that path to victory for him, or that one being a path to victory for him, unless Ponzinibbio's form has fallen off a cliff to the extent that he even gets submitted for the first time in his career. But yeah, there's not a whole lot at stake here either. Graham always uses the word jeopardy, and
Yeah,
neither of these guys are troubling the rankings. So it's just a case of these fighters are filling a slot, I think, this weekend.
yeah, they definitely are. And I think on the subject of filling slots, our next fight is quite similar to Paul. 185-pound division, Abdul Razak Al Hassan versus Cesar Almeida. Obviously, Almeida coming in, losing a split decision against Roman Kopylov. His second fight got a good win over Ihor Potieria in his last fight. Look, I think the key for him in this fight, Paul, and the common factor in a lot of Abdul Razak Al Hassan's fights is Abdul Razak Al Hassan has 5 minutes in him, and he's very
Yeah,
dangerous for those 5 minutes. But if you get him out with the first round, he's there for the taking. So I mean, if you're a betting man in this fight or a betting woman in this fight, I'd be looking at maybe a Cesar Almeida second or third round finish. But you know, I don't want to snuff at how dangerous Al Hassan is really in those. He carries big power. If he connects, he will do some big damage here.
yeah, he's 6-6 in the UFC, and all 6 of his wins have come inside the opening round. I think he's his last kind of 5 or 6 fights, he's lost about 4 or 5 though. So it's like it's been quite a sharp drop in standards over the last couple of years. Again, both guys are kind of getting on a little bit, so it could be partly due to that. His opponent Almeida, he's interesting. Like a relatively experienced kickboxer, hasn't looked sensational in MMA so far, and he's only 6-1, so he's relatively inexperienced in comparison. But he does have a win over a younger Alex Pereira back in 2011, 2012, something like that. They had 3 fights and he managed to win the middle one. But, he's going to be a decent level of striking. And as you mentioned, I think for him, the key here would be just stay safe in that first round. See if you can maintain a bit of distance and not allow Al Hassan in and control that distance, get on top of you and land those blows. He's vicious. He has heavy grounded pound. We saw him he didn't get DQ'd in the last one, the elbows to the back of the head, but it was declared a no contest, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Can't remember who the opponent was, but the opponent kind of ate a few elbows to the back of the head early and just went, no, I'm done. And the fight was done, declared a no contest now. And then
yeah,
Al Hassan was given out about the opponent.
Yeah, it was against Cody Brundage
That's right.
last July. Yeah, that's when that was. Brundage obviously went on. I think became famous for losing to Bro Nickel, really. With all due respect to him as well, but that's when every time I see Cody Brundage's name, I always say, "Yeah, Bro Nickel
That's like
knocked
a
him."
UFC 300 main card superstar.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, look at a couple of heavy hitters there. It'll be interesting. Like I think it'll be an interesting first round. I think if you're Almeida, you want to keep your distance. Obviously, I shoot for the body, try and drain the gas tank of Al Hassan, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I'm actually genuinely interested in this next fight at 185 pounds as well, Paul. Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopylov. Two very well-rounded, good mixed martial artists, and very similarly matched here in terms of skill set. When you're looking at both of these guys, what's kind of standing out to you in this fight?
Kopylov seems to be the one that's maybe generating a little bit more consistency. Like we've seen Chris Curtis look good at times and he's beaten some really good opponents. But in that last one against Brendan Allen, he just didn't seem to turn up at all. So can he be relied upon to do it, every time? And it's difficult to know. Maybe Kopylov might just have that little bit too much quality for him. But I don't know. We've seen flashes of Chris Curtis looking good, and
Yeah.
he's certainly got decent skills in his arsenal. But yeah,
When
it's
I look
difficult
at
to
when I look at
always.
when I look at
But
Curtis, I'm kind of like he's a guy who's very comfortable and very confident when he's in the driving seat and when he's dictating where a fight goes. But if you can frustrate him, or if you can put him on the back foot, or if you can land a couple of good shots and create that little bit of doubt, he kind of becomes his own worst enemy. There, I always go back to Jesus. What was the fight he fought in London that time? Was against Jack Hermanson, wasn't it?
yes, Jack
Is
Hermanson,
that
he
the one
lost.
in
Yeah,
London? Remember, he was giving him the fingers and he was going nuts, and you know what I mean. That kind of just showed a little bit of lapse in the mentality of Chris Curtis there. So I mean, you can drive that out of you in certain ways, but you can also, if you're an opponent, you can bring that back out if you do things the right way. I think Kopilov is a guy that might be able to do that with a guy like Chris Curtis, a tricky striker. Curtis does like to kind of fight on the feet. Kopilov has some serious body kicks, and I think I like this matchup. It's not a fucking like a sensational matchup, but I think these two guys are very well matched.
Yeah.
And I would be leaning. I look at the layoff for Curtis. I know he had injuries. Maybe you find that little bit of hunger there, but I think the activity and the competition that Kopilov has been in there with, and I know Kopilov went out there and he lost to Hernandez, but came back and got a good win over Cesar Almeida in his last fight. He'll be coming in here fairly confident that he can get the job done. I think, Paul, against Chris Curtis.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. And like I mentioned, he's the guy that's kind of in better form. I think he's only lost one of his last 4 or 5 in comparison to Curtis, who's been sort of like lose one, win one. Did you see Curtis being interviewed today and talking about Alex Pereira? Did you see that?
I didn't know what happened.
He said he was offered the fight. I think it was in and around the time that Sean Strickland fought Pereira at middleweight. And he said he was offered the fight, and he said it was the only time that he's turned down a fight from the UFC. So he just said, look, I looked at that guy and I saw the size of him and I realized I had no path to victory. So I said, nah, you're good. Thanks. Fairly honest of him to come out and say that.
Smart decision, Chris.
He was making jokes about he said, I don't know if you've ever met Alex Pereira in real life, but he is absolutely unnerving how big he is. So fair play to him for being so honest. He just said, no, thanks. And moved on to the next fight. So that's it's nice to see a fighter being honest and not living off their ego,
Yeah, big time, yeah. I think that was probably one of the smartest moves of his career so far. A decent fight that on the main card. Moving on down to the main card in the 145-pound division, Austin Bashi versus Christian Rodriguez in the 145-pound division. Bashi coming in off, I think, a contender series win, undefeated at 13-0. Christian Rodriguez, very good fighter. He's been the guy who's been thrown in there with the likes of, Rahul Rosas Jr. kind of picked up a good win over there. Another good win over another good up-and-comer in Cameron Simon. Isaac Dulgarian obviously suffered defeat to Rodriguez too. But it was Julian Arosa kind of went out there, Paul, and kind of stopped Christian Rodriguez in his tracks. He's coming in here against another young, undefeated guy. Have to hold my hand up. Don't know all that much about Austin Bashi. Looking forward to seeing him in there on Saturday night to get a good look at him. But he's a tough opponent there in Christian Rodriguez, I'll tell you that.
It's a massive step up in competition. I mean, Bashi's coming in UFC debut. He's only 23 years old. He's got a reputation as a bit of a dangerous grappler. A lot of submission wins and quite a few by rear naked choke. And it's all well and good doing that to people at that kind of regional level, but stepping up into the UFC is a different ball game. And he's in here with not a veteran, but certainly a guy who's been around the block. Rodriguez must have 10 UFC fights easily at this stage as well.
He's been around a while, yeah, definitely.
And you mentioned it there. Prior to that Arosa defeat, he had he'd won 4 in a row over the last couple of years. So, he's not just a guy who's in here making up the numbers in the division either. He's in there getting his hand raised against a lot of those lower tier guys.
6 fights out of 11 in the UFC. So, I mean, he's been cutting his teeth in the UFC, and, sometimes it can be difficult, but, having that octagon experience behind you, to me, we'll see the UFCs, they will put fights together like this very often. Young, undefeated guys that's coming off to the contender series against, not seasoned veterans, but people with a lot of octagon experience. And like you said, sometimes, if you're ready, obviously you're going to go in and get the job done. But that jump up in competition can eat up a lot of fighters, Paul.
It's a tough way to start in the UFC. And we've seen people get handed, nasty matchups early on in their UFC career. I mean, poor old Reese McKee for one, but
Yeah.
It's this is a really difficult ask. If Austin Bashi gets his hand raised on Saturday night, we're going to know that he's got real potential in him, but he hasn't fought in the UFC yet. And this is the thing now with fighters coming off that Dana White's contender series. You're getting guys that are coming in. I mean, Bashi's got 13 fights, but you're seeing people coming in with like not much more than half of that sometimes, and they're getting thrown into the UFC. it's not an easy place to fight. You need to be ready when you get to the UFC. So I just hope for his sake that he is. He's like I said, just 23 years old. So let's see what he brings to the table on Saturday.
Yeah, indeed. Very looking forward to that one as well. Let's take a look at Punihela Soriano versus Ursa Medic. Very good fight in the 170-pound division. Soriano, obviously, big, heavy hitter. Medic, technical kind of a striker, not that much power, but I'd imagine this one will play out on the feet a good bit, Paul, eh?
Yeah, well, I think Medic has 4 knockouts in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yeah,
Soriano has 3, or else it's the other way around. But out of 8 combined finishes that they have in their UFC careers, there's 7 knockouts. So it's going to be. I think that's the reason why it's been put there as the opener for the
yeah,
main card. They usually like to put something there where there's going to be some highlight reel shit going on. So I think
big
that's
time.
why
Like,
that's there. Like you mentioned there, Medic probably just has that little bit more quality in his game. And if I was a betting man, I'd be leaning towards him this weekend. But yeah, I cannot. I wouldn't back this one to go the distance.
yeah, either would I. Four, like you said about Ursus Medic, I think 4 wins by knockout inside the UFC. It's not to be snuffed at. So 100% for finish rate inside the octagon for Medic, and I think he's in a good, well-styled match for him to go out there and get another one too. But no, I wouldn't fully rule out Punhelis Ariano. I think when he's on song, he's a difficult guy to get out of there too. I'll run through a couple of quick prelims ones that we won't really stop on here. Jose Johnson takes on Felipe Burns in the 125 pound division. Marco Tulio at 12-1 from Brazil takes on Ihor Porteria, 21-7. Obviously, we know, but I sadly remember Porteria because he's the guy who like completely killed off Shogun Rua, and I don't know if I can ever kind of like him after that, to be honest. But one fight I will stop on, Paul, 155-pound division. A guy I always love seeing his name on a card, and that's Thiago Moises. He comes in here and fights Trey Ogden, and this is going to be a very good fight. I think Moises, he comes in and looks sensational some fights. He comes in and looks shit in other fights. That's just who he is. And I think his record shows that 18-8. But I can tell you, you're never going to be in an easy fight when you're in the octagon with a guy like Thiago Moises. And Trey Ogden, he has his hands full on this one.
Yeah, I mean Moises' wins over Michael Johnson and Bobby Green. I mean that's decent work there. Do you know what I mean? And of course he's been in there lost fights, but he's fought a very good level of competition. Didn't he fight Islam Makhachev at one point as well? And he's been in there like Joel Alvarez, who's absolutely tearing it up. Joel Alvarez and Benoit Saint Denis. So Benoit
Yeah.
Saint Denis, I know, has had a difficult 12 months, but prior to that, he was running through everybody that the UFC were putting in front of him. So Moises has been in there with some real quality and, sink or swim at times. And maybe he's just been found wanting in some fights. But in other fights, he's looked, like you mentioned, he's looked excellent. And he's must-watch TV. Like when he's on and the fights are on, that's definitely not one you're going to skip, especially on this undercard that's maybe lacking in some name quality. This could be a good fight. His opponent, Trey Ogden's coming in off the back of a couple of victories as well. So it could be a good, evenly matched contest.
Yeah, indeed. Moving on down, 170-pound division, Preston Parsons versus Jacoby Smith. Jacoby Smith 9-0. I want to say that this guy fought on the UFC 300 undercard and was good. No, he came off the Contender Series, an impressive ground and pound knockout there. 9-0 coming in here to take on Preston Parsons. I mean, another undefeated guy coming off the Contender Series, Paul, coming in against a guy who's had a couple of runouts in the octagon as well, a bit of a trend in those terms. Ernesta Cariate. I don't know. I made butcher that against Nicole
a few
Cariciate.
There's a few tricky names on this one, Ian. There's a Bahraini guy just further down the card, and I'm sitting here twitching in my seat, feeling uncomfortable for you because you've got to pronounce it now in a minute.
Magomed Gadzhizulov. There you go. I
Ah,
had that.
decent, good man.
Yeah. Magomed Gadzhizulov 9-0 against Bruno Lopez in the 205-pound division. 205-pound division crying out for a couple of guys to break through, Paul, in the UFC. Slim pickings at the top when it's coming to who Alex Bahia is going. Obviously, Dan Kalayev fight will be coming up, but if he goes out there and beats Dan Kalayev, there isn't too much coming through that he hasn't beaten already. Obviously a couple of guys he haven't fought like Johnny Walker and stuff, but they're a little bit of ways. We need contenders here in the 205-pound division, and we might be looking at one or two of these kind of contenders that might break through in 2025 with Gatsi Zulov and Lopez here. Gatsi Zulov obviously coming in 9-0 undefeated so far, and
a decent
look,
IMAF pedigree as well. He competed in the IMAF tournaments and competed a little bit on Brave, I believe, 1 or 2 fights as well. So, he's a relatively experienced fighter, but 9-0. Let's see if he's real, if that's a real 9-0, or if it's maybe been a bit of a comfortable journey for him so far. We'll know when he gets in action there this weekend. He's only had the one UFC fight, of course, and
for sure, a very quiet year for him last year. Obviously, coming off the Contender Series in 2023, only had one fight and one win against Bredson Ribeiro in June last year. So I'm sure he'll be looking. Look, he's getting a fight here at the start of the year. Go in there, get a win. Maybe fight again March, April. You could get one in June or July. You could see yourself 11, 12 or 13-0. So when you start getting your names spun around maybe for title contention after that. So coming in obviously against Bruno Lopez, 13-1, has a loss to Bredson Ribeiro. So the last guy that Gatsi Zulov beat is the only guy that has beaten Bruno Lopez. So shout out Bredson Ribeiro. But lots to say in this fight here, but it'll be interesting to see who's the one that will move forward. Victoria Dudakova, 8-1, takes on Fatima Klein, 6-1 in the 115. This is the one. This is the one. Give me some more Fatima Klein. I was down in Edmonton. I was asking Erin Blanchfield about her and how she felt, and Erin Blanchfield gave me back a great answer. I got a shout over the shoulder, and there she was, Fatima Klein, standing behind me. I could have asked her to her face, but big fan. I know you've been watching her in the very early stages of her professional career. I have been as well, ever since she's kind of come through and broke through on Invicta. She looked the real deal, coming in against Jasmine Jastovicius on 6 days' notice, bringing her to a decision. That's a ranked UFC fighter that she brought to a decision on her UFC debut. And she's coming in here on a full camp, primed and prepared. And I expect a massive performance here from Fatima Klein. I think Fatima Klein is going to be one of the breakout stars in the UFC in 2025, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd back that up. And was that one against Jastovicius? Was that also up a weight class? Was that a flyweight?
Correct. Yeah, up a weight class as well. Yeah.
She's in her normal weight class this weekend. She's had that, like you mentioned, that full camp. She's coming in there against an opponent in Dudakova's 8-1, and she's got a decent pedigree behind her too. Came in off the Contender Series, won her first 2 UFC fights, but then lost that last one via split decision. So she's a decent quality, a decent standard of opponent too. So if Fatima Klein can put on a performance this weekend, it's it's all set up for her to do it, but she's got an opponent in front of her that she's going to have to turn up and be at her best to get her hand raised against.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to check. I don't normally give bets on the preview show, but I got to check out and see what price Fatima Klein is to finish, because I think she's going to go out here and finish this fight, Paul, if I'm being honest. And that's not down to the levels of skill that Dudakova has. It's down to how good I think Fatima Klein is. And let me get this up real quick here. The money line on this fight is let me see. Oh my God, -1,000 for Fatima Klein, +600 for Victoria Dudakova. So the bookies aren't being fooled here, Paul. To get for the finish, no price is up for the finish yet. But look at that price indicates, the level of talent that Fatima Klein has coming in here at -1,000 favored against Dudakova. But it'll be interesting to see. Look at like you said, it's easy to talk about it, but you have to go in there and do it. And being a hot prospect, being very highly touted, comes with its level of pressure as well, where you're expected to deliver. So, I think Fatima Klein will be approaching this fight with anything less than a finish. I feel she'd be disappointed. She is a finisher. She likes to go out there and finish fights. So it'll be interesting to see if she can get it done.
Yeah.
Joe Solecki versus Nurello Alaviev.
This could be good.
Yes, this will be good. I think Joe Solecki, obviously a tricky customer. In his
really
own
good
right,
grappler as well.
Super good grappler. Solecki was in there against Grant Dawson last, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And Grant Dawson, had a tough time. Grant Dawson's been going out there and dominating guys, and obviously he went out there and got the win against Joe Selecki, but wasn't able to pass his guard, wasn't able to do anything great, and ended up being like a kind of a boring decision loss for Joe Selecki, a boring decision win for Grant Dawson, but showing the levels that he has with his grappling. He's going to need to bring out those skills again against a guy like Nurullo Aliyev as well, who's a very, very dominant grappler, obviously coming from Tizjekistan. Why can't I say that? Tizjekistan? There you go.
Something Stan.
Yeah, something Stan.
Tajikistan, that's it, yeah.
That's right. We seen Aliyev in February 2023. We haven't seen him since. So it's almost 2 years since we've seen him in there last. And I remember he came off the Contender Series and was mighty impressive. He's had cancelled bouts against Rebecki and Ashmuj, who he's supposed to fight originally on this card, and Joe Selecki stepped in. But I'm excited to see him in action again. And I was wondering, I remembered his name when I seen him, and I was like, I can't remember his last fight, but it's no wonder. It was fucking almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you can sometimes be a little bit rusty as well, coming back off a long break. So it'd be interesting to see what his performance levels are like, and can he carry his energy well over the course of 3 rounds, which he might well need to against Selecki. Selecki offers a good submission threat, and like we were talking about, is a decent grappler. He's been in there. I think he picked up a grappling win over Cowboy Cerrone at one point as well. So he's been out there doing competition grappling and submission only things too. And I like seeing UFC fighters doing that, testing themselves just in the different disciplines.
Yeah,
it's always
keeps
fun.
them active. I don't mind it too now. I mean, there's been some disasters. Who was it? Who went out there and destroyed their knee? Was it TJ Dillashaw, or was it who was out there and destroyed their knee?
I know.
It
It
wasn't
was an older
Aljamain.
fighter.
No.
No, but it was an older fighter in a submission grappling match. A featherweight. Oh, Cub Swanson.
Yeah, that was it.
Cub Swanson. There you go. It was on the tip of your tongue.
That's some show. And that's
Tap
the perfect way to tap or snap. Literally, poor Cub. Still out there getting fucking wins as well. Fair play to Cub Swanson. That wraps us up for the first preview show of the year, the first of many. And I'm looking forward to sitting beside Paul Brown and breaking down a lot of fights this year. And the first one is in the books. And we'll see. We might bring you a little bit of a preview or a breakdown of this early next week. We'll see what's happening with that. But of course, we will be back again next week to break down that massive UFC 311 card. That is Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan, Mareb Dashvili versus Usman. No, Umar
Nurmagomedov. Yeah,
is it Usman? It is Usman. There's too
many. Umar.
Yeah,
Umar is in the UFC. Usman is the week after fighting Paul Hughes.
That's right. Too many Nurmagomedovs.
Yeah. Get the Joe Rogan clip.
There you go. Thanks for listening, everybody. Great to be back for 2025. We'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you again next week.